Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Ozil there! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Oh, when the wheels come falling off. Oh, when the wheels come falling off. Okay, you know what? I'm jinxing it, aren't I? This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. I want to laugh at Spurs, but let me check the fixtures here real quick. What's our next fix? Oh, Spurs away. So maybe we do the laugh at Spurs thing, but maybe we do it sort of under our breath just for now. But yeah, it's fun watching them be Spursy. And never forget, no matter who says they are no longer Spursy, they are still forever Spursy. And here to discuss that and what was a quite excellent 5-1 victory by the Arsenal, oh, by the way, is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
No one else is with us. Clive is coming next. So the way we're going to do this, Tim and I will have a chat, and then we'll have a break. We will probably talk lingerie in that break, and then Clive will be on, and we will have a chat. A couple of quick housekeeping things. So, busy week in terms of pumping out the podcast, but I want to let everybody know that we're having a hell of a lot of fun with our Discord chat. That's the private chat over on Patreon. For everyone, not just Patreons on YouTube, we did a pre-match show yesterday, Scott and I, that is a video show. We're going to try to do more of those, but if you watch it, you may think, please no more of those. Some of the comments include, oh God, I've seen your faces. Oh God, I wish I hadn't seen your faces. I thought you'd look different, ellipse. So, yeah, a wide range of reactions to that. But, Tim, none of that is relevant to our discussion. What is relevant is the game, which we won quite handily, 5-1. And, normally we start with the lineup. I guess what I'd rather do is just say generally, what for you is the sort of overriding thematic takeaway from this emphatic victory?
I'd actually mention the lineup.
Oh, all right, good. Well, great. Hang on. Let me just ask about lineup. Tim, what did you think about the lineup?
Well, and it will build into a wider point.
Of course,
I got to the stadium slightly earlier than I usually do. Only we're talking 5-10 minutes because I won't go into why. Bowel movement.
Okay. I was going to say, is it sexual or scatological? So scatological.
No,
there we go.
Very scatological. So I kind of made a run for the turnstiles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in slightly early, and obviously that gave me time to look at Twitter. Because obviously that's the best time to look at Twitter.
Yes.
And I said a few weeks ago that I don't usually I'm not usually kind of on Twitter immediately before a game. So, when I was away, for example, I was looking and I was thinking, wow, people really lose their shit about the starting 11. And I kind of saw it again, and I saw this. No, we're playing 15 at the back and 17 DMs again. What are we doing?
The two goalkeepers was shocking. I don't know why.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of thinking, if there's one thing I've learned from this season, it's that pretty much every lineup has a surprise or two, and the formation is often a surprise. How we set up is almost always completely different, because it's clear by now that he, for better or for worse, Emery looks at the opposition. So we played a back three because Bournemouth play a front three, and he wanted to match up there a little bit. And it wasn't a back five, it was a back three, and it was a midfield four. I looked at, I've got a privileged view, in the upper tier, and the way it was lined up at kickoff, which tells you what the kind of setup is, was 3-4-3, basically, and he kind of had Özil in that inside forward, but he's not going to stay wide, is he? So it made a certain amount of sense to have wing backs. But yeah, so the thematic thing that came out for me is, I think Emery's spoken a lot and is continuing to speak about rotating his team. We've got some players back now, we've got some players fit, and we've got a lot of talent up front, and in the kind of playing behind the forward and at centre forward. And one thing we don't really know is how to coalesce that talent properly. So I think rotating it is a good way to go. As we kind of discussed on the last pod, I wasn't at all surprised to see 6 changes. Maybe didn't expect us to go 3 at the back, but the thematic thing that came out for me is that 2 of our best performances of the season have come in these 2 games, and they came using almost completely different teams in completely different formations. And what that tells you, I think, is hopefully this kind of adaptability that I think the manager's been trying to build in. And let's face it, for a big part, a few weeks ago, like in December and January, it just looked muddled and we looked lost. But he's trying to build in this adaptability, and he's talking about it a lot at the moment. He's talking about rotating players. We know he likes to share game time between particular players. And, we spoke about, Paul spoke about, we've got Özil and Ramsey now, so we can rotate them. Denis Suarez is there as a rotation option. We've got Aubameyang and Lacazette, and we can share game time between them. They can both be involved in every game. It's just one will play 60 or 70 and the other one will play 20 or 30, and we can keep going like that. And hopefully this last kind of couple of games, I hope it means the players are starting to get it and starting to kind of pick up on it, and they're starting to become comfortable adapting both formation, selection, tactics, etc., etc. So I think the thematic thing is when the starting line comes out, it doesn't mean you have any idea how Arsenal are going to play. True. And it might be horrible. It has been plenty of times this season, and there are plenty of times where after the game you can say, yeah, we shouldn't have played it back, like Barté away. Yeah, shouldn't have played a back 3. No point. It didn't work. We did X, Y, and Z wrong. But really, I think the thematic thing to take is that the starting lineup doesn't really tell you that much, because people were all talking about how defensive it was, and what we got was one of our best attacking performances of the season. And actually, with the goal we gave up was a consequence of being overly cavalier in front of our own box and being perhaps a bit too adventurous and a bit too confident. So that would be my thematic thing. And I'm not saying Emery's cracked it yet and that's it, because we'll have harder games against tougher opposition, namely this Saturday. And we've said since the beginning of the season, we've all said that we think Arsenal will be a bit up and down, and maybe in 3 weeks' time we'll have a couple of bad results against Spurs and Man U, and everyone will say, "Oh, this is awful again." So I think the pleasing thematic thing for me here is that we got probably an even better performance than we had on Sunday, with a different set of players and a different formation. And maybe all of us should kind of hold off losing our shit until at least the game has started and we can see what we're trying to do.
You had me until that last bit. I can't commit to that. I'm still going to lose my shit regularly. But no, I agree broadly with all of that. I think one of the main thematic takeaways for me, and maybe some of this is ad hoc, given we've just played Southampton and Bournemouth at home and looked pretty good in both of those games where you would have expected us to look pretty good. But I am leaning towards the idea, really 2 ideas. One, that we are just a better team going forward with one up front. That what it allows us to do is play players on each wing who are both more comfortable in those half spaces and wide spaces and overlapping with the fullbacks. And that if you take either of those players out, what you get instead is Aubameyang or Lacazette, neither of whom is great out in those positions. And that means we wind up being almost entirely a left-hand biased team when it's, Iwobi and Kolasinac doing all the work, and that's much easier to shut down. So is that something that maybe we've stumbled into, so to speak, the idea that one up front with more natural wide players supporting them, whether it's in a sort of a 3-4-3 like this was or a 4-2-3-1, either way, it just balances the attack more?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably what we've learned from the last couple of games is that we don't need Xhaka, Guendouzi and Torreira in the midfield at the same time. That it doesn't, and then just hope that Lacazette and Aubameyang can do something with very little extra support. We need to play with 2 of those guys, and again, I think we've got the room to rotate there if we want. I still slightly prefer Xhaka and Torreira, but I've got no issue with Guendouzi dropping in for one of them every now and then. But yeah, absolutely. I think move it. It's almost like, and there are different there are different kind of intonations of this formation. But I think what we've kind of done, very broadly speaking, is moved from 4-3-2-1 to 4-2-3-1, and we've put, like, instead of having Xhaka, Guendouzi and Torreira, we're now playing either Ramsey or Özil there, and that to me is what suits much better. That's why we're producing much better attacking moves, rather than, I don't know if you remember the West Ham game where I think we played like 3-5-2 and we basically just cut Lacazette and Aubameyang adrift, really.
Yep.
And just tried to let them fend for scraps, and while our midfield was off somewhere doing something else, and there just wasn't enough connection between those two areas of the pitch. And I think they do it in very different ways, but Ramsey and Özil connect those spaces together. Ramsey largely does it off the ball, Özil does it with the ball, and they can both be very effective, often are very effective in their own different ways. So I think basically what we've done, and that's why 3 at the back in this game didn't bother me in the way that perhaps 3 at the back did against Barté, because we didn't have that extra attacker. So I think that's what's changed, effectively, playing like one of Ramsey or Özil, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. I think, Mkhitaryan's been in fantastic form.
He's the next guy I want to come on to, and I think this has sort of been, for me, the turning point for these two games is the play of Mkhitaryan, and he always seems to be influential, if a bit inconsistent. And I think what you're seeing here is his comfort level in the team growing as he's coming back from injury, and the difference that it's making. And he looked very comfortable with Ozil and very comfortable with Aubameyang. And it makes me wonder if there are sort of pairings on the pitch in this squad that maybe make sense. With all the best will in the world for Iwobi, who I really think has had a very good season and is a very good player, he's not a great final third player yet. And I think you saw the difference that having two of those kind of players supporting Aubameyang makes in Ozil and Mkhitaryan. So is that really sort of what's happening, that the squad is kind of breaking into or factioning off into pairings and groupings that work better together? Or is that looking for a narrative where the real answer is just playing better attacking players yields better attacking play?
I think it's a little bit of that. I think basically both Mkhitaryan and Iwobi, because both of them, their end product has gone up recently. And again, I think it just comes back to having that kind of number 10 there. So it's not 2 of them behind one striker, it's 3 of them. And you've got that kind of connecting presence, be it Ramsey or Özil. And they both, I think, really thrived on that, because Mkhitaryan, I think is like a secondary creator, which is why I quite like him in the team. And you remember when he came back, we spoke about his presence in the team, and I said that, and I think we all agreed that I thought he'd start pretty much all the time. He's like one of the pieces that Emery regards as kind of indispensable. But again, it's kind of the same answer. What's changed is the last couple of games he's used an actual number 10. So it's not all on Mkhitaryan, like at Barté, for example, it's either all on Mkhitaryan or all on Iwobi to try and create something. And that, I don't think that quite suits either of them. But when they've got someone to, riff with or play off of, be it Ramsey with his movement, pulling defenders away, or be it Özil kind of coming and getting the ball and drifting into space, it just makes his job slightly easier. And like I said, I've always liked Mkhitaryan in the team. I understand his imperfections. I think the best way I could describe it is I saw I don't know if people follow Flanny Balls on Twitter.
Yes, I do. Flan.
A good follow, I think. And he said that he was talking about how he likes Mkhitaryan. He was saying he always does a lot of things. Yeah, basically, which means, and sometimes those things can make him look bad because he's always involved. And if he's not having a good day or the structure's not right, it really shows up because he's on the ball a lot, he's running after it a lot. He's a busy player effectively, but when he looks good, he looks really good. And I think that's a really good way of describing it. And I've always liked his presence in the team because I think even when he doesn't play well, he gives something to the structure. So even on his bad game, I think he does something that's useful to us. But on a good game, like he's had the last couple of games, and like he had against Bournemouth, he makes you, he kind of makes you realise, this is the guy Dortmund had.
Yeah, and look, I mean, with all the problem is this winds up feeling like a referendum at some level then on Iwobi, because Ozil took the spot that presumably would have been his, or arguably Ramsey's, I guess you could say. And you can say, well, look, this is a much easier game at home. But I mean, even if you compare Iwobi passing at 77% at home to Bate the other game, Mesut Ozil, I believe he completed 97%. 64 of 66 passes. And lest you think those were all just sort of at the midfield stripe, 33 of 34 in the attacking third, 3 of 4 inside the penalty area, had the beautiful assist from Mkhitaryan, and had that gorgeous hit it into the ground goal that only he knows how to score. Now, I'm not here to sort of, what's a polite way to put this, cup Mesut Ozil's balls gently in my hand and lovingly stroke him. I'm not here to do that, because I admit that this wasn't necessarily the highest caliber of opposition, but Bate Borisov at home wasn't either. Maybe a little more pressure in that game, you could argue, but the thing is, I just think the precision and the movement, when you have someone who completes 64 of 66 passes and a big chunk of them in the attacking third, that's a big difference to someone who's, taking a third of his passes and giving them away and not completing them. So, I mean, we love Iwobi. We love Iwobi on this podcast. We stand for Iwobi on this podcast and all the things that Iwobi can be. But in that role, do we maybe have to look at the performance that Ozil put in a game like this, and maybe just have a rethink about Iwobi as a first choice player, first name on the team sheet kind of player in that role?
Maybe. I still see him in there with Mkhitaryan and whoever this number 10 is. So I think Iwobi and Suarez maybe eventually can rotate a little bit. But I still, assuming we start with a back four, I still think having 3 behind the striker, and I think you have a nice balance then, because Iwobi is the guy who goes and gets the ball and fetches it. And then you've got a number 10 there, whether it's, and it depends what you want that number 10 to do. If you're going for a high press, like we did against Southampton, you go with Ramsey. But if you want someone to pull defences out of place, all over the place, you go with Özil. And I think Mkhitaryan's like a good complement there. It's almost like, the 3 stages of creation, effectively. It's a bit like, the
that whooshing sound you hear is that going over my head, by the way. Yeah.
That kind of the evolution charts you see on the wall. It's a bit, it's almost like
we're like growing up from ape to man or whatever.
It's almost a bit like that. It's like, get the ball, give it to this guy. It's a bit like the evolution of an attack. And I think you get it through those 3 players. And to be fair,
Iwobi was good against Southampton, which was a good attacking display. So I'm not trying to, knock him. You know what I mean? Sorry, I interrupted, but I want to just be clear. This is not a, beat Iwobi, use the stick of a good performance to beat Iwobi. This is, I think, more talking about Ozil and his special and unique way of influencing a game in the final third and keeping the ball, and whether we've sort of missed that precision in our game on that side of the pitch, especially because that's the side of the pitch where you have Kolasinac, who also, while very good, is not a high percentage passer, not a keep the ball, keep possession ticking over kind of player.
Yeah, precisely. I think what it comes down to effectively is it's different strokes for different folks. Different games need different things. And Bournemouth at home, you play Mesut Ozil because Bournemouth are awful away from home and they give you lots of space. And Özil pretty much always produces against Bournemouth. I think one of his best games for the club was 2 or 3 seasons ago when we played them at home, and he scored in that game, and he just absolutely tore them apart. And so, Bournemouth at home, you play Mesut Özil. Do you play him Tottenham away? Probably not. And so I think coming around to that way of thinking, and this is kind of what I meant at the offset. So, like, when Özil's probably not in the starting lineup on Saturday, people are going to lose their shit again because they like Özil, and that's perfectly understandable.
Do you think so, or do you think there are people, even I'm not talking about like the really dogmatic Ozil defenders.
Yeah.
I mean the average person who likes Ozil and wishes he would play. Do you think that they are kind of open to the idea that away to a big team maybe doesn't suit him?
Yeah. Plenty will be. More than plenty will be. But this is kind of what I mean about kind of waiting to see what the plan is and how it unfolds because it's just not obvious from the start. So Özil will play in some games. So the way we pressed Southampton, for example, on Sunday, if we'd started Özil and Aubameyang in that game, that wouldn't have happened. Like that first goal that came from Lacazette harrying, that doesn't happen with Özil and Aubameyang. And our game plan there was to hassle them and try and upset them. That wasn't our game plan against Bournemouth. Our game plan was to try and, skate around them, move them around with the ball. So I think it's just as simple as that. I think that's what Emery is going to do. And don't get me wrong, recently I think it's been a bit more than that with Özil. It hasn't just been, purely tactical. There has been a disciplinary streak to it. And in fairness, he's kind of explained what that is in no uncertain terms when he was talking about availability at training. So he's told us what the issue is. And so that, the last couple of months, it hasn't been entirely tactical. But, if Özil keeps turning up every day, then I think this is how it will play out. He'll play plenty. He just won't play every single game. Yeah. And I kind of think that's fine, really. I wouldn't want Özil in there if our plan was to press opponents up high. But Bournemouth at home, there's pretty much no one else I'd want.
Yeah, what do you think of that technique? I mean, it's so crazy, isn't it? Yeah. We've seen him do it before, but it never gets old. I just imagine thinking that's the easiest way to score from there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, first of all, even from a physics perspective, I don't understand how he does it. I don't think I could reproduce that without losing my knee cartilage. And the really interesting thing, so it's not just the audacity and the technique, both of which are, because you've got to be brave to do it, because if it doesn't cut, it's like Panenkering a penalty. If it doesn't work, you look like an idiot.
Well, I mean, and worse, right? Because if it doesn't work, you could literally, like you said, twist your knee, fall down, and be on the ground holding your leg.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then there's the technique aspect and the presence of mind to do it in the heat of the moment. But the thing that really gets me is that it works every time. And it works every time, because if you're a goalkeeper, what do you do with that? And it's especially when you see it in the stadium, no matter how many times he does it, I'm always like, what did that take a deflection or something? My eyes don't quite adjust to what's happened until I've seen the replay.
I see. The thing is, Tim, I could see being able to do it and get the ball to hop off the ground a little bit.
Yeah,
to get over. You know what it would be to get over an onrushing tackler who's gone to ground.
Yeah,
but he gets that 6 feet in the air. It's like a Carlos Vela chip, but done with his technique. I don't see how it works.
Yeah, exactly. There was a little video of him doing one before a Europa League game earlier this season. He just during the warm up, he takes a penalty in the warm up and it goes in, and that's a completely stationary ball. And I don't get it at all, but it's a wonderful skill, and most importantly, it's really effective, and that is the most important thing. It's not showboating; it's because it works.
I want to talk about Guendouzi for a minute. I think this is a real referendum on how people watch football in a way, because Guendouzi made 2 really bad giveaways, one of which led to a goal, where he lingered on the ball a little too long. Now, I think it was a foul, but I think it's one of those fouls where he definitely gets the ball first, but then he goes through the back of the man. And I don't think that's legal, and I think it's a foul. And I think 2 or 3 seasons from now, when Guendouzi's reputation has grown, he probably gets that call. Having said that, look, if there's one thing we would say about Guendouzi all this season is he holds the ball really well under pressure in tense situations, and that's a good quality. But sometimes he does it a little too much, and when he gets dispossessed, he does look for the ref to bail him out. He didn't get bailed out here. Lesson learned. Maybe he'll just be a little bit more careful. And I also thought Leno put him in it. I don't know that pass was necessarily the best one to give him. But putting that aside, the reason I bring it up is there are people who will remember that moment and say, Guendouzi, I don't see what Emery sees in him. I thought he was spectacular in this game. He played almost 100 passes at 88%. The thing that I think is interesting is Xhaka had an excellent game against Southampton. And the player he passed to the most, and by the way, he made 20 fewer passes in the game against Southampton than Guendouzi did in this game, but the player he passed to the most was Kolasinac. And it goes back to something we talked about on the last pod about how Xhaka's preferred pass is really that long line-breaking pass out to the wings. The pass that Guendouzi made the most, overwhelmingly, 18 times, was to Ozil in a half space or a more central space, a ball that progresses up the center of the pitch. And I think that that dynamic is a little bit different, and I think that Guendouzi carries the ball forward at his feet a little better than Xhaka does, although this is not meant, again, to knock Xhaka. But I'm curious if you came away from the game with the same feeling that I did, that Guendouzi heavily influenced it and that put his mark all over it, or if you were more concerned, by the giveaway for the goal, and if that's sort of from the people you talked to in the stadium, is that what the lingering memory was of his performance?
No, all the guys I sit with really, really, really like him. I mean, look. So I agree with you. I thought he had a really, really good game. The way he took the ball forward, the way he drove it forward. There are a couple of over-the-top balls for Lacazette as well, which were excellent. And what I think you accept with any player, let alone a 19-year-old, that a risk is necessary, right? And no matter how much people in the stadium scream and cry and stamp their feet, it's necessary. To kind of play the ball around the back and suck your opponents in to make the space further up the pitch. It's totally necessary. It's why all of the big teams do it. And so you accept, I think, with that a bit like Liverpool with Alisson and Man City with Ederson as well. I remember Alisson made a really bad error early in the season, and Jurgen Klopp was like, "Yep, but we ask him to play like that because it's really valuable to us, and it gets us a lot more goals than it loses us." So yeah, we have to accept that. There's going to be a time where he tries to dribble around someone and it's not going to work. We kind of that's kind of a price worth paying, so long as it doesn't happen too often. And it's the same with any risk, and it's the same with Guendouzi. You've got a 19-year-old who's got this immense personality, and we were all purring about his performance at Man City because he was taking the ball in positions like that and doing what he did there, and he was doing it well. And yeah, this time he got caught, and he shouldn't have, and he knows that. He doesn't need anybody to tell him that. I think it's the first time it's happened this season. So given what him doing that gives us, again, I think that's really a price worth paying. You've just got to hope that when the mistake comes, it's fairly consequence-free, which it was on this occasion. And what you want as well is for the player to respond to that, or not to respond to it, actually, is just to say, oh, well, happens. And that's exactly what he did. He got straight back on the ball afterwards, and that's immensely promising for a 19-year-old to do, to make that kind of mistake and then go, no, I'm going to go back and get it again because I know that I was right to do that, and I made the wrong decision in the moment, but everything that led up to that, I've got to keep doing that because I know it's good. I know it gets results. And even when, it made the crowd really nervous, and it was some people around me really, really fucking irritating. Like, just get rid of it. Honestly, nearly in tears. Like, it really, really does my head in. But anyway, and yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a bit like we say about Xhaka, right? You can't just take the mistakes away because they happen, but I mean, everything else he did in that game was absolutely superb. It's easy to say after you've won 5-1, but that made it 2-1, and that brought Bournemouth back into the game. And I wasn't fuming with him. I thought, okay, you shouldn't have tried to take the player on. You should have moved the ball on. But I get it, and this experience will make you stronger and all of that. And I just had total faith in him to keep playing his game, and that's exactly what he did. So, yeah, I thought he was brilliant again.
Yeah, and one thing that I think he's really good at, and I'm curious to get your take on this, he presses up to break up play really well. He had 8 ball recoveries in the game. I think he does a really good job pressing up the pitch and just sort of being in the position to break up the transition to the other team. I mean, do you think that his off the ball work is improving? Because I thought that was a real weakness in his game early, and it's something that I've been much more impressed with as the seasons wore on, in this game particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. What he's got really good at is instead of like diving in for a tackle, is just like blocking the passing lane.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, he gets about a yard or two away from the player, and then he doesn't go and commit himself. He just stands slightly to the right or slightly to the left, wherever the ball is, and that's an incredibly perceptive thing for a 19-year-old to do. It's exactly what Fernandinho does for City so well. You never see like Fernandinho leap into tackles or leave the ground or even really make tackles. He just does that. I'll run up to you and then I'm going to stop, and then it's up to you to try and pass around me, and you can't. You're going to have to go backwards or sideways. And yeah, I think that's something that's definitely come on in his game, because earlier in the season I think he was maybe, should we say, a bit puppyish in those circumstances, and it kind of, it augurs really well that he's learning these quite wily tricks very early in his career.
Yeah, it's great to see. And I think that if we can, forgive the occasional dispossess, and I realize that's hard when you do something that gives up a goal. And I realize there goes some people listening to this who are going to say, well, you didn't forgive Xhaka just the last podcast when he made a bad pass that nearly led to a goal, didn't even lead to a goal, and you're forgiving Guendouzi for giving up a goal. And the reason is I'm playing favorites and totally being biased, and that's why. So, live with it.
And as much as I like Xhaka, in fairness, one of them's 19 and the other one's 25, so... Yeah, there is a difference there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you would say is the upside to playing a 19-year-old who looks this good is the ceiling of what they could become, whereas I would say with Xhaka, he's at the ceiling of what he can become. So if you think Xhaka is good enough, great. If you don't, he's never going to be, because this is as good as he's ever going to be. Whereas with Guendouzi, he's only going to get better. At least you would certainly think so at 19. We'll finish up with just some quick hits. One of the things that I think we should at least touch on is Carl Jenkinson. He has been a source of ridicule, either the lovable joker or just a representation of fallen standards at Arsenal, that he's been with us so long we couldn't move him on and he was never good enough. And, it just depends how miserable you want to be. But he is an Arsenal fan, grew up an Arsenal fan his whole life, is sort of living his dream, gets to play in front of the Emirates for the first time since, I believe, 2014. And I thought he did really well. I mean, I'm not saying this is our right back, hooray, we found one. But I certainly think he played well enough to make an argument for himself being the guy in Bellerin's absence. And, he is a reasonable athlete. He gets up and down the pitch relatively well. He's energetic. I mean, you certainly can't fault the fact that he does seem to try hard. And, let's not look past trying hard as an important part of the game. I mean, are we going overboard just because we want to like the guy?
So I thought he was pretty much what I expected he'd be, which was a bit of a 6 out of 10 performance, some good stuff, some stuff where I thought, maybe a better opponent might have punished that. But the thing is, where this, it's become a meme basically, hasn't it? And I've said this loads of times, but because of this meme that he's the Arsenal fan that joined the team, I think even though he's not quite good enough, there's this thing going around that he's just a guy who came off the park and started playing, and he's not an idiot. He's not quite Arsenal quality, but I've thought for a while, Bournemouth at home, we can play Jenkinson Bournemouth at home. That's not a problem. Would I play him on Saturday? No, but Bournemouth,
you wouldn't play him on Saturday? Would you go with Lichtsteiner?
No. Yeah, probably. I thought Lichtsteiner was pretty good against Southampton when he was on, and I think if he's got Mkhitaryan on that side, I'd probably go with that just about. But Jenkinson, I think Jenkinson is a lower level Premier League footballer, which that's kind of fine for your third choice right back.
94% of all footballers would kill to be that. So
exactly. And I find it, maybe it's the wages. I find it a bit weird that so few Premier League clubs seem to come in for him. I always think someone in that, like a Bournemouth, maybe. I know they just got Nathaniel Klein on loan, but someone like that, I think he'd be perfectly fine at a club like that. And so I've never thought, it'd be a disaster to play Jenkinson. He's got weaknesses, but it's not I think people have started to think that he literally is the mascot or something, we're playing Gunnosaurus at right back.
How come we haven't tried Gunnosaurus at centre back at a minimum?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not quite like that. It's I think maybe we've gone a little bit over the top in our imaginations, but at the same time, we shouldn't kid ourselves that this is like Cafu incarnate. Like, he will probably go in the summer if someone will take his wages, and that's probably right. He should go somewhere else, hopefully in the Premier League. But if he can shop window himself playing in games like that, fine with me.
Got to keep one of the British core around. Come on, someone's got to be there. All right, your last two quick hits. One is just about Aubameyang, guy that I was kind of worried. He kind of needs a goal. Is he flagging in confidence? And then he's put through in on the keeper. The classic example where a guy low on his confidence can find a million ways to butcher it, and nope, he just rounds the keeper and slots in. I can't remember the last time we had a striker round the keeper. To be honest, it was nice to see. But what's really encouraging about that too was the Mkhitaryan connection, and it was sort of the first goal that I've seen Aubameyang score where he and Mkhitaryan linked up in sort of Dortmundish fashion. Maybe just a little bit of an encouragement there on Aubameyang seeing him finish like that, and the sort of telepathic understanding with Mkhitaryan coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. I never worry about Aubameyang because Aubameyang's finishing is always a bit
erratic.
It's quite hit and miss, but he just picks up those positions so often. When he goes through like that, I never doubt him. I think you're right. I think he really wanted a goal. Like there was a point in the Southampton game where he really probably should have teed up Torreira, but he went for it. And I think that's because he really, really wanted the goal. Which
to be fair, he tried to play
natural.
Lacazette in that game too, where he was in. So, I mean, he hasn't become completely selfish.
No. But you can tell he wanted the goal, and
he did not want to come off. He knew there were more goals in that game. It's the first time I can remember seeing him look a little bit aggravated. Yeah,
and but I wasn't that worried about him, to be honest. He always finds such good positions that, has he had like a serious goal drought in the last?
This was it.
3 or 4 years?
Whatever he's in right now or was in, that was it.
Yeah, I don't follow Dortmund that closely, but I don't think there's been like a 5, 6, 7 plus game stretch where he hasn't scored. He'll always come up with goals if he's on the pitch. So yeah, I wasn't too worried about that anyway. But I'm going to save some things for Clive to talk about in the next section, and I know he's going to want to talk about Lacazette because he struck a nice free kick, and I'm going to say that it should have been ruled out for a Socrates foul on the wall, but that's going to be fun for everybody. There's a little sneak preview there. I'll finish with this though, Tim. You always talk about how your least favorite fixture, apart from having to go to Baku, is that where it is for the Champions League final? Baku, yeah. I mean, because you're not a fan of those people in that country, as you've stated on this podcast before. I don't feel that way, obviously. But you've always said that Spurs away is the one you dread. And I was just kind of curious to get your take. Since they've moved to Wembley, has some of the heat come out of that? Does it not feel the same anymore? Yeah, because Wembley is like a big, very circular stadium in a big expanse, and whereas White Hart Lane is a tiny little shoebox.
Did you say shitbox? Yes, I agree.
Tiny little like shoebox stadium poked down a side road where you have to come out the away end through an alleyway. And whereas, Wembley, once you're like 10 yards away from the away turnstile, no one can tell where you've come from because it's just this big circular kind of expanse. So it did feel a little bit like that last year, like but Spurs have been there another year now. Maybe it feels a little bit more like home to them, but I'm still dreading it. Don't get me wrong, I'm if you'd have told me a few weeks ago that we'd be going in on the back of 2 of our best performances of the season and Spurs would be going in on the back of 2 defeats, I certainly would have taken it. But I'm still, like the anxiety is kind of already kicked in, put it that way.
It has for me, but I almost feel like it's a freebie in a way. We've just played 2 great games, scintillating attacking performance, and we have to beat United. And that's still how I look at it. I think anything we get against Spurs, the narrative is shifted now that they are still big favorites at home to beat us, and anything we get against them will just continue their complete collapse and our ascendancy. So I think this is one where the pressure's not on us. It's on them. They've lost a couple in a row. Yeah. They've looked bad doing it. They sort of imploded at the end there against Chelsea, and they were getting chippy, and they were starting to fall apart a little bit. They lost to Burnley, which is a terrible result. The pressure's on them to show that they're not collapsing. So I like how that's changed.
Yeah, same.
I think this has probably come at the best possible time for us in that respect. If I asked you to name a lineup for that game and you named it, what would your percentage confidence be that you got it right? Would it be above 50%?
Yeah, maybe. I had to think about this today. So, do you want me to name it?
All right, yeah, let's hear it. If you put your money where your mouth is.
So I think he's going to go with the back three again. So obviously Leno in goal, Koscielny, assuming he's fit. I think Mustafi will come in, and no, sorry. So I think Mustafi will only come in if Koscielny's not fit. So it'll be Socrates, Koscielny /
Yeah, we need Koscielny.
Mustafi.
He's been brilliant. Yeah,
and Monreal. Then I think you'll have Lichtsteiner and Kolasinac as wing-backs. I think he'll go back to Torreira and Xhaka in central midfield. And then I think it'll be Iwobi and Mkhitaryan behind Lacazette.
How do you think people react to that?
I mean, whatever we do, they'll lose their shit.
Can I ask you a question? In a game where we're probably not going to have the lion's share of possession and a lot of the game is going to be played in transition, Is Lacazette the right striker in that situation? Is it overly simplistic to say that you want Aubameyang to run in behind?
The thing is, I quite like the way that Lacazette contributes to that kind of forcing the transition.
I'm going to tell you why I don't like the back three either. Sorry, finish your thought. My mistake. Sorry.
I guess I'd say I'd quite like Ramsey to be in there. I don't think he will be, but I'd like Ramsey to start.
I like Ramsey for his energy. Absolutely. I think that he might have been in line to start had he played at all in any of these games going. But he played against Southampton, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see him starting. I mean, he has opted for Ramsey in the games that mean something. And Ramsey has produced performances. Let me tell you why I don't like the back three and why I kind of hope he doesn't pick it, though. I realize that the default is to say the three center backs just makes us more solid at the back. I haven't seen any evidence of that. But here's what I don't like, and I noticed this even against Bournemouth. If you think about the early part of the season and how we played against big teams and sort of how we were playing in general, we had great compactness through the center of the pitch with that extra body in midfield. One thing I noticed against Bournemouth, and maybe it's because we were playing more pushed up the pitch and more open because they were so bad defensively and we were on the front foot. So maybe this is a misread on circumstance, but the middle of the pitch is a wasteland. It was Guendouzi and Torreira and no one else there. There was a lot of ability to play through the middle because, Ozil and Mkhitaryan kind of splitting out and drifting wide a little, the fullbacks pushing up and wide on the pitch, and you really just had Guendouzi and Torreira marshalling the center of the pitch, kind of on their own. Now, I guess you could play a back three where the wingbacks aren't always charging forward or even tuck in, a la kind of a City or something like that. But I do think we had better central compactness, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Early in the season, now we were giving up monstrous amounts of ground on the wings, if you remember. And City in particular tormented with us with that. So we'll see. But it'll be interesting. I think we can leave it there. I want to leave something for Clive to talk about, and we will obviously have a post-match podcast for the Derby. We've got a Patreon podcast coming up that's going to be a mailbag, so if you want to get your questions in, you can still do that by signing up on Patreon, but either way, we love you and we appreciate having you here. So, Tim, I know that you're a happily married man. If you need any help with that, though, we got the hookup, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Of course. All right, well, Tim's on Twitter at Stillberto. Thanks always, Tim.
My pleasure.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to sell you some lingerie. We're going to come back and talk to the one, the only Clive, and see if there's anything left for him to say about this game. I have a feeling he will come up with a thing or two. Stay with us. Okay, everyone, it's time to tell you about our friends at Enclosed Lingerie. You can find them online at The Enclosed, ENCLOSED.com. Enclosed Lingerie is a Lingerie of the Month club. That's right, just like a Beer of the Month club, only better, because it's a high-end luxury lingerie gift for you and your partner that's going to enhance the intimacy in your relationship. Right now, if you put in Arsenal at checkout, they're going to give you $35 off any gift from Enclosed Lingerie. So you're going to want to go to theenclosed.com and sign up now. What better way to celebrate the romance in your relationship than celebrating with a gift from The Enclosed? And the gifts keep coming every month. So while it can be difficult to remember to keep the romance, to keep the intimacy in your relationship, The Enclosed has your back. Every month, you're going to get that high-end luxury lingerie gift, and it's going to remind you of the importance of romance in your relationship. So do it now. Go to theenclosed.com. There is a perfect fit guarantee, so you never have to worry about the fit. It's beautiful high-end luxury lingerie. Just go to theenclosed.com and enter promo code ARSENAL for $35 off at checkout. Do it now. All right, we're back, and as usual, the headliner has followed the show opener. Clive is here. We're recording this slightly later than expected because Clive does not know how to get home. Clive can be found on Cliver, on Twitter at ClivePAFC, although I would certainly sign up for a social network called Cliver. Clive, do you want to explain to the listener why it was that you were unable to find your way home?
I went to a league meeting. I manage a team, and we had one of our sort of AGMs, and the roads were closed on the way back. They closed all the major A1 roads, so I had to go a 1 hour detour.
Well,
there you go.
I am glad you are here, as are the listeners. So, big win, good win. I want to ask you a question about what Emery's doing, because I think the challenge for a lot of people to warm to him has been that we all crave understanding. I find that I rarely grab it. It is elusive. It slips through my fingers. But I want you to help me understand. I think what's confusing, right? So we play Southampton with a back four, and we look really good. We get the job done. So everyone says, the back three is dead. We found something that works. We go to the back three against Bournemouth. But the back three looks good, and we play really well. But then in the second half, with a lead, but not a huge lead, we switch to a back four, and we look swashbuckling again, and we dominate them and finish with a big win. And so I guess what I would ask you is, try to help me, in your estimation, obviously none of us know for sure, but help me understand what Emery is trying to build here, because I see a manager who is getting results, and I certainly appreciate what he's done in the last two games. Yeah. But where I struggle is trying to understand the underlying philosophy or thought process behind it. So how do you see how he's making these choices and what he's trying to build towards?
Well, it's one I've been more comfortable with than maybe many others, really. I'm comfortable in not knowing. Do you see what I mean? But I'm comfortable in trying to learn. So I put myself in his shoes. Every single ground is new. Every single atmosphere is new. Every single team is new. I know we have continuity with Steve Bold, but he still has to experience it, right? And he is going into these environments and he's learning about them. He's learning about his players. He's learning about other teams. He's learning about what form is like, what the league is like, what cup competitions are like. He is learning, right? So that's number one. And we've had somebody that knows everything. So, and I often think, when we were doing these podcasts earlier, we've been desperate for a manager to make us look prepared and modern and flexible, and I haven't forgotten that. And this guy, for me, is prepared, modern, and flexible. And I think he sees it as a process that he's on. He often hear him quote those words. It's all part of the process. And I think he has a points target in his head, and I think he's going for that. And I think this stretch of games that we're heading towards now, I think he has a target in mind. I think he will see where he is if he hits that target. And there's a couple of games in there that 2 or 3 games in there that are quite difficult. And I think it's in accumulation to try and get as high up the league as possible. If it doesn't work in his first year, I think he's going to obviously be supported into his second year when the pressure will be slightly cranked up. Because he will have been to these grounds. He knows more about these teams. He has a greater sense of data. And expectations will be much greater next year, whether we finish top 4 or not, right? Because we will be looking to say, yeah, okay, mate, we've watched you. We know what you can do. Now you want to get more Bournemouth at home games rather than Huddersfield at home games, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess then the next thing I want to ask you is, how fortunate do you think we've been maybe with this run, only in the sense that, if I look back to the hammering we took against Liverpool, right? So we go to Liverpool and obviously, it didn't go our way. It was a pretty bad game. And I'm not saying that there's anything to be particularly embarrassed about, but 5-1 is a heavy defeat. We'd come off drawing Brighton, not our best period. And then we have Fulham at home and Blackpool away, and we go 4-1, 3-0. And it kind of stops the bleeding and put a little positivity back into the fan base. How important do you think it was after losing away to Bate after that really dreadful away, albeit victory at Huddersfield, losing to Manchester City, we're really rocking to come home for Bate at home, Southampton at home, Bournemouth at home. I mean, these have been really important wins. The last two really impressively done. Do you think we've sort of caught a break with the fixtures there in the sense that they've allowed us to right the ship? Because I think after the loss at Bate, you were hearing the first whispers of, well, if we get knocked out here, he should go, or I don't know if he should be given a second season. And these fixtures have really allowed him to right the ship.
Yeah, maybe. But if you look, the Bate game, I felt was an overreaction. I really did. If you look to that game, it was very much one set piece header. Let's sit in our box on a muddy pitch. And it was just not possible to do much more than what we did, right? So it was just one of those games. It'd been an FA Cup game. We'd have been out of the FA Cup. It would have been our fault many years ago. But I felt there was a bit of an overreaction to that game. And we all knew we'd beat them at home. It wasn't as comfortable as I thought it was, but I thought we'd beaten them at home. And then we did have a couple of nice fixtures after that. But I do think some key personnel staying fitter, coming back in, have just stabilised things and allowed him to rotate slightly. And, the freshness of players and the competition in the dressing room and the fairness by which I think he's treating players, I think is now manifesting itself in a sense of togetherness on the pitch. And I know we've spoken many, many times about the Ozil situation, but for me, all he's doing is managing the dressing room, and he's trying to make sure that all the players are equals. Now, that's hard for us who've been brought up with star mentality when we support teams, and we don't expect our players to be treated as equals because we want to see the stars on the pitch. And when they're not for every minute, we question, especially if we lose that game. So I think there's a massive level of adjustment for us to adjust to him. But when you see the team play like I did against Bournemouth, but for me, it was the spirit within the team. You've got to say to yourself, hold on a minute here. He is now doing something which is far more collective, far more team-based. And I think we're going to bring more players along with us. This is a group of players, by the way, that have failed in recent years, really haven't reached the heights we want them to. They've managed to put money in their pockets, but they haven't really managed to give us, apart from the FA Cup wins, a lot of joy. There's been a lot of angst, particularly in away performances. So he's turning that around, and I think he's slowly but surely, within the fan base, his respect is growing. Within the game of football, other managers and other coaches, you don't hear much negativity about him because they know what he is and they know how good he can be. Now, I'm a fan, so not everyone's going to agree with me, but I'm a fan of somebody that prepares for games, is flexible for games. And I heard lots of people talking about, we won't see the back three at home. I just smiled to myself. I thought, yeah, we'll see the back three. You know when we'll see it? When he feels we can get run down sides. When he feels that the other team's got fast forwards. It's quite interesting. Bournemouth home and away back three. Because he knows they've got speed up top. They've got people who can run away from us. So I don't want to give them those spaces to run into. I want to flatten it off. And I want to make sure we're in charge and don't give them something to, with Ryan Fraser et al. To run into our holes. And he did it. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know what, mate? You know what you're doing. You're trying to make sure that we don't trip up. Now, some people were saying, well, it's only Bournemouth, Clive. Why do you got to bother with a back 3-4? Just put an extra man in midfield. Well, I've seen Arsenal being broken on many, many times. Right, and when it happens, we all say, well, why doesn't he get an extra midfielder or defensive midfielders in, or why don't we speed up our centre mid? We all have a hindsight coaching view. Well, this guy's doing it before the game, and sometimes the balance is wrong. But funny enough, when you get some of your better players in better form, suddenly we don't question the system, do we?
No, of course not. And I think that I've already picked the title for the podcast, but it certainly alludes to the attacking players. I've already talked to Tim about Mkhitaryan, but I think his return to the squad and return to form has obviously been crucial. I thought Ozil played really well. To me, it is looking like two wide players alongside a center forward is the right way for us to play. Tim and I already spoke about it, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. It allows us to not have such a left-sided bias and depend so heavily on that Kolasinac on the wing sort of trope that we've developed. But I mean, for you, I know you don't like to focus on the individuals, but stylistically, does it look more balanced and a little more cohesive when we play with one up top and two of the more natural wide players alongside?
It can do, Elliot. It can do. And it can do, particularly when we score early, because then we have multiple passing options in the centre of the pitch, right? So it can do. The way I look at football is every single game has its own story. What I'm pleased about in these recent games is that we're starting to score in first halves and we're starting to control the story of the game. We're taking our foot off the gas late in games. And guess what? Our players look fresher. We're able to sustain 2 good performances, 2 or 3 good performances. And I think the key message for me to Emery is we've thrown away too many first halves this season and we've had to work very hard late in games. And I think we suffered some injuries because of that. We got players back fitter. We're seeing a little bit more structure. I think one of the key players for me that made me feel more positive was Granit Xhaka, actually. I know he didn't play versus Bournemouth, but my feeling is when he is playing well, it just looks easier to progress up the pitch. So it's almost though with Arsenal, you need 1 or 2 players to simplify our offensive patterns. And it's Xhaka and Özil. For home games, I think you shift your playmaker slightly further forward and he simplifies, he fixes things, he puts oil in the engine. But it's interesting Xhaka was rested for this game. How's your money that Xhaka plays at the weekend?
Oh yeah, I think that's a certainty. Yeah. I mean, well, I was just going to ask you. So, I mean, do you think it will be with Torreira though, or do you think it might be alongside Guendouzi?
Maybe it's all 3. Maybe we might go a diamond against Spurs, right? Maybe we might do the diamond thing against Spurs, and that would make a lot of sense if you're going to play 4 at the back, or we might go 5 at the back, right? So, but the good thing is, Elliot, I don't know. And someone asked me, Clive online, what do you think the team should be? Do you think he should play? And I went back and said, I don't care. The most important thing is how we play. Right. So we've seen the back 5, I think it's versus Huddersfield, if I remember rightly, and it was quite negative. And I said at the time, our wing backs were pushed back. We didn't push forward. You see the back 5 last night, and no one's questioning it because we were really aggressive, really pushing on, really running into holes, both wing backs running through lines. Then suddenly it works, right? It all works. And so for me, it's not the system, it's how you play it, what your emphasis is. And you know my thing, quality or system, it is down to quality. Now, what we're seeing recently is an improvement in execution, confidence and quality. You can't deny a Mkhitaryan, Özil, Iwobi. When they're on form, they add quality. When it's just one guy in Iwobi trying to carry that load and he's struggling under pressure, then guess what? We weren't so creative and people talking about negativity of system when really it's quality and confidence of player. And this is why you asked me what Emery's doing. I think he's laying down a bedrock which we'll only see when the quality of individuals become a little bit more consistent and he can rely on a few of those leading pillars within his team. And I think I'll see that coming next year, Elliot. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, look, this is going to sound typically moany from me, but like, I agree with you. I hope that Denis Suarez isn't the sign of things to come. I'm still not totally convinced by that player, but it's early still. I'm not writing him off. I'm just saying, if we're replacing the likes of a Ramsey or maybe even an Ozil with that caliber player, I don't know that you could say would be lifting the quality, elevating the quality.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, though, mate. We know there's some people that potentially are in departure lounge, but what we don't know is who's coming. And the moment we see players come in that maybe we potentially know or like, then the mood changes. I just saw a headline tonight about Rabiot potentially, and it's a headline, a tabloid, right? So I'm not selling it to anybody.
If there's one thing Emery needs, it's another player who's notoriously difficult to deal with.
yeah. Well, if he seems to be managing a certain Mesut Ozil right now, if he's won that battle, fair play to him, because the previous manager did not manage him. He allowed him to do exactly what he wanted, and the rumours that I've heard is that Emery's stock within the club has risen because of how he has approached that situation, which has been going on for a long time, and people have not been happy about that situation within the club, within the medical staff, particularly how he has managed to manipulate the previous management. And the new management are trying to be a little bit more democratic, shall we say. And it's been a struggle. And when we lose games, I'm afraid fans don't care about people and relationships. They care about the next game, the next result. He's trying to manage a dressing room for the next 2 to 3 years. And he's trying to put a culture in place. And we've all spoken about the Colney Creche, the spa that's at Arsenal, whatever you want to call it, the easiness, and he's trying to change that. And if you don't take on the biggest boy of the playground properly, then you're not going to be able to change anything, right? So for me, I'm supportive of him trying to manage the club. He needs to get results. If you don't get results, people then question your management style.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is the challenge ultimately now is we are in position to finish top 4. And the running isn't easy, but it's doable. We're there. And so I think we're at the stage of the season now where power plays and looking for the future and building a base and, trying to create a unity in the squad or a future of harmony or whatever expression we're going to use about it. Like, I think it almost has to be put aside. And now we're in pragmatism world, right? There's whatever it is, 10 or 11 games left. Is it 10 now? And we can finish top 4. And everything has to be subordinated to that at this point. And my hope is that he has instilled the squad with the kind of unity and understanding of what he's trying to do at this point that they can just do it. But if it means he has to use Ramsey, he has to use Ramsey. If it means he has to use Ozil, he has to use Ozil. I think the time for being philosophical has to be set aside now because, and to his credit, whatever he's done to this point, whether you want to say by luck or by brilliance or a combination of the two or a process or however you want to say it, he's put us in an excellent position. Now he has to land the plane. And so I think everything has to be subordinated to that. Let me ask you real quick about an individual since it's your favorite thing to talk about. We do this podcast after every single game, and after every single game, we talk a little bit about system, and we talk a little bit about the process, and we talk a little bit about players. And weirdly, here we are in, March by the time you're probably listening to this, and I can't remember the last podcast where we spent any real time talking about Lucas Torreira. And yet, he plays a lot, he's very consistent, he's rarely spoken about negatively, although we rarely sort of talk about him in any glowing fashion. What do you think of Lucas Torreira? I mean, he's sort of the quiet linchpin of this midfield. He's not Coquelin. He completes 90% of his passes. He's a high passing rate guy. He gets fouled a lot. He keeps possession pretty well. He just, he gives it to his midfield partner and hairs up the pitch to intercept or drops back in. But, because he's slight, because he's not sort of a Coquelin in the sense that he's diving into 2-footed challenges and things, he goes a little bit under the radar, and I'm curious to see how important you think he is to what we're trying to do.
I think he's majorly important because it's interesting how people perceive players. I mean, if you look at our team as a whole, defensively, we question the quality of some of the players. Fullbacks, depending on how well they played that night, we question the fact we need a couple of fullbacks, potentially. Attacking midfield, we debate that because of the Özil Ramsey situation, and some people have always questioned Mkhitaryan and Iwobi, so we question that. We're pretty comfortable with our 2 forwards. I'm not too sure if they should both play at the same time. So if you're looking at our team within like 4 units, the base of our midfield and maybe our 2 forwards, we are pretty good. We almost ignore them. We almost ignore it because they are delivering, and that's something that we haven't had. The base of midfield, we've got 3 very good players that are comfortable at the base with a couple other supporting squad players. And Torreira allows, for me, he does the job I like to see. He wants to control the area, and he does not like other people controlling it around him. And so he goes after people. He accelerates the game. He goes after people and they're stepping into his house. He said, no, you're not coming here like that. I'm coming for you. And he has a mentality of a midfielder that says, I want to own this area. And you're not going to own it. And if you decide you're going to come through here, I'm going to do something. I'm going to catch you unawares. I'm going to transition on you. So he has a level of defensive dominance about him, which for one so small, belongs in a bigger body. And I like that about the 3 centre mids that we've rotated around. They all want to dominate, either dominate the ball or dominate the space, and they know their area. I think you, Elliot, mentioned a few times, when we are dominant, we need them to release a little bit more. Maybe Torreira and Guendouzi to release a little bit more and become more efficient around the edge of the box and be there for the sets and be there for the shots outside the area. And don't be so cautious. Feel the game and be a bit more attacking. But I really like these three players, and it'd be interesting to see how we develop upon them in a year or so. Obviously,
Wait, no, sorry, keep going.
No, the two younger ones, we all hope we're going to be there for many years. Xhaka, I think, is very important to his club at the moment, but I do see a time in maybe 18 months when Xhaka will need to change and we'll need to speed that up, that position. And I think there's no problem with that. He would have had 4 or 5 years at the club, and hopefully he'll have retained his value, and we can do something else there. And you stick developing your club, developing your space. But yeah, I love what Torreira's brought. I think he's transformed our centre mid with Guendouzi. If you look at our team from last year, forget the goalkeeper, I think's doing very well. He's a modern goalkeeper, but it's those two players that have made us think, this is interesting, and I think we've become much more competitive because of what they've brought to the table, and it's maybe freed up Ramsey and Ozil to do more, and Mkhitaryan to do what they do slightly higher up the pitch.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting to me with Torreira is we hear constantly with Iwobi, he's still young, and he is still young, and he's only going to get better, and where he is right now is good, but he'll only get better, and if he drops a 5 out of 10, we're like, he's still young, and with Guendouzi, when he loses the ball on the edge of his area and it leads to a goal, we say, he gives us a lot of good stuff, and he's 19, he's still young. Yeah. Torreira is really young. Torreira has stepped in, been basically an ever-present in our midfield since the start of September, has played a part or a position that has been a dumpster fire for Arsenal for years, where everybody who has played it has looked totally lost in that role and embarrassed. And he's done it with confidence. He's done it with character. He's done it with involvement. If you look at the games we've been good, where our attack has been good, you'd think Xhaka and Guendouzi is the more attacking lineup. Well, Torreira starts in the 5-1. Torreira starts in the very attack-oriented win over Southampton. It was actually Guendouzi and Xhaka who started together against Bate Borisov, where we didn't attack very effectively. And so I think he adds another dimension. He can step around a challenge. He gets fouled a lot. One thing I love, do you remember in this game, he got the ball under pressure from Guendouzi, and he was going to get dispossessed, but he pinched it between his legs, and he fell down on top of it, and he tried to scoot it out of his legs, and it looked like he was going to wriggle away, but when he wasn't going to wriggle away, he committed the foul. He very rarely just gives the ball away in midfield.
Yeah, he's streetwise.
Right. He will commit the foul or get fouled or fall to, that low center of gravity. He does this quite a lot, actually. He's kind of fall on top of the ball if he's losing it. He just understands that he cannot be the guy to lose the ball, or it puts us under immense pressure. And that responsibility, that awareness, I think when you consider that is he still 22 or has he turned 23? I don't think he's 22 until he's 23. We can agree on that.
We can.
Point is, I just think this is a player who we maybe don't realize what a star we have in him in a role that we have craved that has not been played well for many, many years at the club. And if we didn't have a 19-year-old playing alongside him some days, we would be marveling at how well he was doing as a young player. First year in the Premier League. Sometimes South American players come into the Premier League, cultural shit, cultural adaptation, language adaptation, schedule all that, and he's handled it brilliantly. So I think he deserves a little more focus than he gets.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a point well made. And I think, again, because we have got good options there, we can rest him. He hit a wall at Christmas, probably the first Christmas he's ever had to play, and he hit a bit of a wall.
Yep.
And he hit a bit of a wall. Xhaka hit a bit of a wall. And suddenly we're playing this 19-year-old kid every single minute. Then, the other day we just take him out, misses the game. We still win the game. And now Torreira's back in. So we're now rotating because the quality in that area is good. So we don't drop away so much. And they are adapting. And that's probably the best Guendouzi Torreira game for me. I think that's the best attempt he's been without Xhaka almost all season, right? So they're starting to develop, and so in a year's time they're going to be something else again. And my theory about the 18 months left in Xhaka's life, Arsenal life, may come to fruition because we're going to want something else. We're going to want maybe something faster, ball carrying type centre mid, which we haven't really got at the moment. So things develop. I think it's a great show. I think that area was an area that we spoke about for so many months. We barely speak about it because we're happy with it. We're happy with it. Only touchwood injury is going to make us lose a bit of depth there. But I just like the way they compete. So we go to Spurs at the weekend. And I'm pretty confident, which if we play 3 or 2, it doesn't bother me. I'm pretty confident that we can compete. A year or so ago, when Spurs were rocking up with Dembele and others, I was concerned. But I'm not so concerned this year.
Yeah, and I'll tell you. I mean, I think we're catching them at the right time. I mean, I know it sounds obvious. So let's finish with this. We've righted the ship. We've had a couple of really interesting performances. I think the manager has to make some tough selections, given that, we play again on Thursday and Lacazette can't play in that game, so maybe he'll decide Lacazette can have this game, only played a part against Bournemouth, and maybe he'll give him the start against Spurs and rest Oba for Thursday. But putting all that aside, just generally, what, I know you don't want to pick the lineup, and you say you don't care about that, and Tim already picked the lineup, so it's totally fine, so we have that covered. Just give me your expectation for the match and how you think it might go.
I'm hopeful. I think Arsenal need, we can all sort of map out the other fixtures coming up, and we got, I think we've got Leicester away, I think we've got Wolves away, and I think we've got Watford away, and they're going to be tough games, right? So hopefully we're going to pick up good points in those games. But we need to win a game someone's not expecting us to win. And if Spurs and Manchester United are staring at us, and if we were to get 4 out of 6 in those games, I think that sets us up really well, right? So, Spurs have got away with it. They've had 3 last 5-minute wins before they lost these last 2 games, and it was annoying me they didn't come back to us earlier. Now they're coming back to us, right? So it's interesting. I know Spurs probably better than any other team apart from Arsenal, and I don't rate them. They are a percentage team. They're almost statistics-based team. They play percentages. They play in areas. They play territory. I would go back 3 for them because they will go long early, and I would probably flip to a 4 later in the game. I would use that formation, but I'll be very aggressive. I'll be very aggressive in wide areas, and I would push their fullbacks back. And I think we can get a point. Wembley's not their home. I think we can get a point.
They don't have a home. I think we should emphasize.
Yeah, they're not playing well. I wish we had more away tickets because that would tip the balance, right? But they keep us low despite the massive attendance they're going to have. But I do think this is the most confident I've felt for an away game. And because I do think Spurs are tipping over the edge. And if we were to score early, I think we would test their mentality. And I think the most important thing is for us to dictate the story of this game by not having to come from behind. If we score first, I really fancy us to get something from the game.
Yeah, it's so tough in a way. I feel for Emery. You can't win as a manager, right? Because if we had come off a drab victory over Bate after losing at Bate, after a drab victory over Huddersfield, and kind of meandered our way to kind of getting the points against Southampton and Bournemouth, people would have said, we're going to lose at Spurs. Let's just focus on United and Rennes. But we hammer Bournemouth 5-1, and now everybody's on Twitter giving it large that we're going to go beat Spurs at Wembley. And it's just like, now, if we don't manage to win, he's going to be right back under the same scrutiny, which, look, that's management. I get it, but
it is.
It is.
I hope
no
he
fun.
I'm a fan of what he's trying to do, and I'm really want him to get to the summer. What's happening behind the scenes with the director of football, etc. I want to see that come to fruition. I really do, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens and what identity we take on. But the man needs a signature away win. Yeah, that's what he needs. He hasn't got that yet, and if he was to get that at the weekend, I think that would bring a lot more people on board with him, and I don't care who scores the goals. I just think he needs that for a bit more trust within the fan group, and I think it'll propel us confidence-wise if we were to win at the weekend. I suddenly Wolves away doesn't look so big. People laugh at Wolves away was looking big to me. Leicester away, new management. You know what? So what? We've been at Spurs and taken them out. It all looks relative, and I think it's such an important weekend for that we come away with something. Manchester United at home, another bogey team for us. We never do well. Tactically, what else can Solskjaer do? I think we can do something to them. And so I think that's going to be a huge game as well. But if you also get this signature win, Elliot, I tell you now, you can see togetherness on the pitch. I think people are quietly enjoyed the last couple of games, but they're looking at this one. And if he was to get it, I tell you, it would bring everyone together again. That would be great.
Yeah, it would. And look, I mean, I'm going to pump the brakes just a little because our last 2 away games were Bate away and Huddersfield away. One win, 1 loss, no good performances. And that's not to say we can't go smash Spurs, and I certainly expect that we will. You'll hear my prediction at the very end of the podcast. But I think we have to prove that we can do it away. I mean, the results speak for themselves. This has not been a good away team. The one upside of it is if we can get something at Spurs away, maybe it gives Emery a little data point that he can look at and say, all right, well, this is what I need to be doing. And if there's one thing I would say, I think he's been conservative away. We know that losses, draws are basically a loss in the Premier League. So you could make an argument to go be front-footed and go try to win it. I look back, I cannot help it. I still think it was such a sliding doors moment in our season in some ways. That second game of the season at Chelsea, where we had him on the ropes towards the end of the first half and we were playing some really swashbuckling attacking football and they really didn't have an answer for it. And he gave in to his sort of more conservative instinct second half. What we have, we hold. And he got punished for it. And I think he could have gone for it and maybe he would have gotten punished anyway. But a draw and a loss are essentially the same thing in this league. And think of what 3 points in that game instead of 0 points in that game would look like right now. I think there's an argument. Looking at how we played in these last 2 games, looking at when we're our best, and you'll see in the title of this podcast, it says it right there. We've got a lot of talent up front, or it's something like that. You'll see you're listening to it. It'll be written there right at the bottom of your screen. Maybe, just maybe, go be front-footed at Wembley and see what happens. And I will tell you this, if we go down swinging that way, I don't think anyone will have a problem with it. But we'll see. There's plenty of time to debate all that on the post-match podcast. It's an early one for Americans here. I think it's 6:30 kickoff my time, so not going to be doing the big drink Friday night. Who am I kidding? Of course I am. Clive, I appreciate you giving us some late night time after getting lost on your way home. And I hope that no one shouted you down at your AGM. And I hope we have a fantastic, huge victory at the weekend. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, man.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. Yankee Gunner gives 5-star review. Write nasty things about Paul. Write nasty things about Scott. Oh, you know what I should do while we're here? Maybe read some reviews. We never do this, and you guys are so good as to write reviews of the podcast. And I just think it's important that, we reward that with reading some of them. So we have a lot of 5-star reviews out there, and I got to level with you. I am really, really appreciative of that. I think it means so much that you will give those. I want to read one. Really, Arsenal host, ? If you were a Tottenham fan and wanted to host a podcast, this is what it would sound like. I will miss Clive, but I cannot stand the host any longer. That is from Donut Officer. Here's another one. Below average. American presenter should stick to U.S. sports. Way he talks about the game doesn't feel right, and he's too obsessed with stats. His guests are pretty good. So, we do appreciate these, and I hope that you will continue to give them to us because we certainly deserve them. In any event, as I mentioned, block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Spurs 0.